Okay, welcome to this second screencast in our Level 3, Level 4 COVID series. So this time I actually would like to talk about the Oracle at Delphi. But beforehand, if you remember from yesterday's screencast, I was just talking about where Socrates taught. He didn't teach in a school or in a particular area. He would walk the lanes and the alleyways of the Plaka, Plaka district in Athens, which was the oldest inhabited area of Athens, and it's a lively, very bustling, very happening place today. It's a real sort of a tourist trap there at the foot of the Acropolis. And I've just got a video here that I took the last time I was at Athens, which might give you an idea about what these streets are like. Okay, it's obviously modern and these modern shops and that sort of thing, but the streets themselves haven't actually changed too much structurally. So these are the streets where Socrates, if you can imagine him walking through these streets, stopping at corners, stopping at areas, teaching, people listening to him, arguing, causing controversy. This was basically Socrates' school. So here's a little video of the Plaka district today. So you can see how narrow the streets are. You know, Socrates would have walked these very streets himself, walking along here, students following him stopping perhaps on the left there, gesticulating, talking about something, preaching his philosophy, carrying on walking through, dodging through the crowds. This is the Plaka area where Socrates would have taught. It's very much a big shopping district today in Athens. Walking through here, every store owner is inviting you in to see their wares. You can imagine here, it does get very crowded, and it would have back in the day. Socrates dodging around here, stopping outside this shop to talk about something that he's seen and he's thought of. You can see the closeness of the buildings. Okay, they're modern buildings, but it would have been the same back in 5th century BC. Everything close, everything overhanging, little areas where Socrates would stop and talk about his philosophy. So that's a quick snapshot of the Plaka area, what it's like. Lots of alleyways off the side, lots of little lanes, lots of places to stop where Socrates would have done his work. Okay. So what I would like to talk about in greater depth today, in some depth today anyway, is the oracle at Delphi. Now, an oracle is where one can go to hear the word of the gods. And the oracle at Delphi was probably the most important oracle in the Mediterranean world in the time that we are looking at. Delphi is in the center of Greece. As you can see here, here is Delphi, very much in the center of Greece. And now because the Greeks believed that Greece, or Hellas as they called it, was the center of the world, I mean, obviously it's for the Greeks it was the most important place, then Delphi is the center of the whole world. It's actually the whole center of all is zeroed in on Delphi. And at Delphi today is this, the umphalos, or the belly button. The Greeks believed that this was the belly button of the world. Delphi was the belly button of the world because Delphi was obviously the center of Greece and of the center of the world itself. Now, the site of Delphi still is and was a sacred site going up the mountainside. This is what it used to look like in the 5th century BC. You can see here we have a lot of buildings that would have been marketplaces down here, and here is the sacred precinct with the temples and theatres to the gods going right up, and God actually got a running track at the top here. This is what Delphi would have been like. People came from all over the ancient world, all over the Mediterranean world, to visit Delphi. It was a sacred site for all people, not just in Greece and throughout the whole Mediterranean. And people would come here to worship the god Apollo. Apollo is the god of sun, the god of music, the god of prophecy, the god of light, and Apollo could see all, and Apollo knew the future. And right in the center of the sacred precinct itself was the temple to Apollo. People would come here to hear the word of the Lord, hear the word of the God, Apollo, to hear what he had to say about the future. No one would undertake a serious undertaking without going and asking Apollo what was going to happen. So, for example, if a businessman was going on a very dangerous sea voyage and had lots of wealth to carry from one place to another, he would go to the oracle at Delphi to see what the gods had in store for him. Likewise, any ruler, any king going to go and invade another area, or knowing that an invader is coming, would also go to the oracle at Delphi and hear what they had to say. Now, as I said, it was dedicated to the god Apollo, and Apollo knew all. Apollo was probably one of the most feared gods in the ancient world, I would say, because he knew all, and people needed to get Apollo on side. If Apollo was angry with you, if he had not done something correctly, if he had offended the god, then woe betide you. Now, what people would do, they would approach the temple, the sacred temple to Apollo, and after paying a suitable fee, would wait their turn in a waiting room, and then when it's their turn, they would go into the sacred enclosure within the temple itself, and they would consult the Pythia. The Pythia was the priestess of Apollo. You can see her here in this Renaissance era engraving. She was called the Pythia from Python because legend has it that when Apollo established Delphi as his sacred site, he had to slew a python that had taken up residence there. And one would go in and consult the Pythia and ask the question about the future. The Pythia was sitting over a fissure, a crack in the ground from which fumes would rise up. And the Pythia would inhale these fumes and go into sort of a trance and then utter the words of Apollo. Now, modern excavations have discovered this is a very volcanic area, a very active area under the crust of the earth, and it's highly likely that it was methane gas that was coming up through the earth, and the priestess was inhaling the methane gas and getting herself high and then uttering the words of Apollo, which is probably fair enough. But Apollo was famous for replying in very sort of vague terms. For example, there was a ruler, I can't remember, of an area in Greece. I can't remember, it was King Croesus, I think. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly. But he was going to go and invade the Parthian Empire, modern-day Syria. And he sent a message to consult the oracle at Delphi, essentially say, look, I'm going to go and invade Pythia. How is this going to go? And the reply was, a great kingdom shall fall. And so this king thought, brilliant, I'm going to go and invade Pythia and I'm going to be victorious. Went and invaded Pythia, got absolutely annihilated, and his kingdom fell into rack and ruin. So the words of the god were correct, that a great kingdom did fall. It just wasn't quite the one that this king had expected. The remains of the temple to Apollo are here. One would approach up this ramp, and here is the entrance to the temple. You can't obviously tread on these stones today, but you can get fairly close. And this would have been like the anteroom or the waiting area. And then when it is one's turn, I'm going to move in, and here, in this little room here, was where the Pythia herself was consulted. And once you've heard what the god has to say, you could then vacate the premises. Hopefully you can see from these images that Delphi is situated up the mountainside. It's an absolutely beautiful part of the world, and it's hard to explain. I mean, you really have to visit it. But one can see when one is in Delphi as to why the ancients believed this was close to the gods. Up the mountainside, obviously closer to the gods, it's a very steep mountain. But there's something about the area, the light I can only describe as being very soft. It's very, very soft there. It does seem otherworldly as you go up the mountainside and away from sort of the doings of people. It's an incredible, incredible place. If you ever are fortunate enough, post-COVID, to travel to Greece, you absolutely must, I insist, you must go to Delphi and experience it for yourself. I've got a couple of short videos here. They definitely don't do justice to the sacred mountain, but anyway, here we go. Cool. And this one here taking the temple itself.
We have
I'm heavy breathing a bit. It's a mountain after all. I've walked up it.
Reading. Walk in there. Hear the word of God. In the room.
Cool. I got fitter as I went along. That was on the first trip. But going up the mountainside of Delphi, here's the remains of the temple itself. Then there's actually a theatre, an amphitheatre here for theatrical plays, because the ancients believed that we need to have your religious and then the philosophical, the theatrical side of theatre is most important as part of who we are as humans. It's not just the religious, it's watching going to the theatre. And also at the very top is a stadium, is the running track, about 200 meters or more, give or take, further up the mountain. So you've got those three facets of humanity, really, the religious, the theatrical, and the physical, which the ancients believed encompassed who we are. They wouldn't neglect either one of those three. The running track is quite cool, actually. You can see it's very well preserved. It was preserved by a rockfall from these mountains up above that kept it there. I don't believe it is still in use today. Some of the ancient tracks are still used for school events, actually, would you believe? But this one I don't believe still is. And here's a photo of this is the 2019 trip. You might recognize some of the year 13s from last year. They went on this one. They were year 12. There's head student Philip Garner there. There's Jeffrey, and there's Sean Cleaner. There's a few others. There's Ruth. There's Miss Monk. She was there as well. All right, so that's at the track there. And as you can see by the umbrella, it was actually raining, so it did add to that sort of otherworldly idea. Now, the story goes that a friend of Socrates visited the oracle at Delphi and asked the oracle the question, is any man wiser than Socrates? And Apollo, via the Pythia, replied, no man is wiser than Socrates. Now, this message confused Socrates when it got back to him, because he knew that he knew nothing. And so how could he possibly be the wisest man alive if he knows that he knows nothing? And so what Socrates did was he decided to test the gods, and he would go and question people as to what they knew. In particular, he would target people who claimed expert knowledge. So there's a famous encounter. He went to ask a general. He said, my dear general, you know what courage is, I presume, because you're a famous general. Yes, I'm a famous general. Okay, please tell me what is courage. And the general replied, well, courage is standing firm in face of the enemy. So Socrates replied, well, couldn't one be standing firm in face of the enemy if they were actually frozen with fear? And so the general was like, yeah, okay, so that first definition doesn't work. And so the general kept giving definitions of courage, and Socrates would keep questioning them and finding holes in them. And in the end, the general had to admit reluctantly they did not know what courage was. So Socrates did this. He went around to generals, he went to poets, he went to politicians, he went to tradesmen, he went to anyone who had any sort of claim on expert knowledge, and he would ask them essentially to teach him by questioning what they knew. And people found out that they kind of didn't know what they thought they knew. So Socrates realized that he alone knows he knows nothing. So he deduced that from that, the god was saying that because Socrates knows he knows nothing, he is thus the wisest person in the world. And so that is what drives Socrates on as he practices his Socratic method, that he knows nothing. ultimately he really pissed off the Athenians and they sentenced him to death and he had to drink poison. But that's another story. Okay, thank you.